I disagree with that logic. It is historically incorrect. It is anthropologically incorrect. It is biologically incorrect. It is genetically incorrect. It is ancestrally incorrect. African people are the first people on the planet Earth. And every other human family, except possibly the European, descends directly from us. If we do not leave Africa, no other race evolves from us. We would still be the only people on this planet if we never left Africa. For those who say we were in America before slavery, they are correct. We were in America before slavery because we were everywhere before slavery. We're the oldest people. We were on the planet by ourselves for tens of thousands of years before any other race evolved from us. So we're the first people in America. We're the first people in the Caribbean. We're the first people in Europe. We're the first people in Asia. So yes, we were here. When you read the diaries of Christopher Columbus, he talks of seeing African people, black skin, woolly hair, just like the ones he saw in Africa. Let us remember that Christopher Columbus did not discover. Christopher Columbus spent time in West Africa, and if memory serves me correctly, he spent approximately 2 weeks in the Elmina slave dungeon, during which time he was given a map that showed him how to get over to the so-called New World. He was educated about the three major currents that flow from the West African coast over to North America, South America, and then the Caribbean. And so all he had to do was catch the sea current to the direction that he wanted to go. Oh, yes, he had several Africans who were on board with him. And of course, absolutely. And some people would call them Moors, but Moor means black. So we also have to pay attention to all these different names that they give to African people to try to make us think they were not African people. But yes, he had African people who were there with him. And he took the third current, the bottom current, that brought him to the Caribbean islands. So it was not a mistake. It was not an accident. It was not a discovery. He was simply following the instructions that were given to him by Africans who had already circumnavigated the planet. We were the first people on the ocean. Yes, it's true. The Portuguese had a golden age of maritime science, and the Chinese had a golden age of maritime science. But people forget that the Africans were the first with the golden age of maritime science, because if we were not the first in shipping, how did we get all around the world? Because we definitely did not swim. So getting back to your question, we were here before Columbus. So yes, you have pre-Columbian Africans in America. You have post-Columbian Africans in America. The issue that we have with brothers and sisters who are miseducating our children and our people, telling them that they didn't come from Africa, is the fact that everybody came from Africa. And it is ridiculous for the people who look the most like Africans to be the only ones in the world who would dare say we don't come from Africa. We all come from Africa, but we can't get distracted by this type of propaganda and incorrect rhetoric, because we've always had to deal with this as American Africans and throughout the diaspora. When you look at the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and after his deportation from America in 1927, many of the organizations who came after Garvey also propagated to our people that they were not African. We have a history of black leaders coming before our people and basically distracting them from their Africanity. And this is rooted in self-hate. This is rooted in psychological homelessness. This is rooted in African racial low self-esteem. And I also think it might even be rooted in a CIA scheme to brainwash black people into thinking that they were already here so they can do away with concepts such as reparations. They can do away with concepts such as repatriation. They can do away with concepts such as global unification of all African people, because there are some very clear and very powerful ramifications for this type of dangerous and senseless rhetoric. But now that we have DNA testing, we don't have to debate who is and who isn't from Africa. Roll up your sleeve, give some blood, send it to the land, send it to the lab. And when it comes back, let's see if it says you're anything other than an African. But the other point I want to make, that I think some of these pretendians, because this is what I call them, good sister, pretendians, because they're pretending to be Indians. Here's the thing. The 5 major Native American tribes fought with the Confederacy to maintain slavery. All 5 of the major North American tribes were slave owners themselves. So when an American African tells you, I'm a Cherokee, I'm a Choctaw, I'm a Seminole, I'm a Creek, what exactly are they saying? Are you saying that you were a slave of the Seminole, a slave of the Choctaw, a slave of the Chickasaw? And if you were a slave of a Native American tribe, how is that any better than being a slave to a white man? And still further, even if your mother was raped by a Chickasaw slave master, why would you be proud of that? But let's go a step further, and I'll stop with this point here. We have 4 grandparents. We have 8 great-grandparents. We have 16 great-great-grandparents. And we have 32 great-great-great-grandparents. If one of your great-great-great-grandparents, one of 32, was a Native American, how does that disqualify all of your African blood and now you become 100% Native American? How is that possible? And why are you dismissing all of your African DNA to lay claim to 1/32nd of your so-called Native American DNA? It's all self-hatred. Well, it can't be reactionary, because if it wasn't for Pan-Africanism, Africa wouldn't be independent right now. In fact, if it wasn't for Pan-Africanism, I don't think we get out of slavery or colonization. Many of your major abolitionists were Pan-Africanists. So I would definitely reject the notion that it is reactionary in any way, shape, form, or fashion. However, you may have elements, personalities, organizations, or individuals out there who may, in fact, practice their Pan-Africanism in a reactionary way. So I will allow room for that to exist. But historically, I don't see how that description would apply to Pan-Africanism. As far as Pan-Africanists pushing a simplified, monolithic version of African people and African culture, I would likewise reject that as well. Pan-Africanists are not in pursuit of a utopia. I want to be very clear about this. I do not think diversity is a problem. Diversity is a strength. Okay, it is a strength that African people see the world in different ways. It is a strength that we have different cultures, different ethnicities, not only on the continent, but around the world. It is a strength that we have various spiritual systems. All of these different aspects of who we are, as far as I'm concerned, those are strengths that should be embraced. I don't think we have to create robots. As Pan-Africanists, we're not out to create a world of African robots. All we're simply saying is that all African people in the world have some commonalities upon which we should use to serve as a foundation by which we can achieve solidarity. That's all we are saying. We can keep our diversity. No one has to stop being who they are. But if we want to survive the 21st century, if we want to thrive in the 22nd century, then we have to come together. And if we're going to come together, we have to do so in a system of organization. Listen, white people don't like each other, all right? I've worked around them my whole life. The Jews got issues with the Italians got issues with the Irish got issues with the Greeks. They got chauvinism and classism and, all types of isms. But guess what? When it comes time to take care of the business of white supremacy, they stop fighting long enough to take care of the business of white supremacy, and then they go back to their petty differences. The Asians don't all like each other. Chinese think they're better than Japanese. Japanese think they're better than Vietnamese. Vietnamese think they're better than South Koreans. South Koreans think they're better than North Koreans. But when it comes to the best interests of the Asian people, they can call a timeout, a truce, a ceasefire long enough to take care of the business of the race. You see the same thing with the Arabs. Okay, the Iraqis think they're better than the Iranians. The Iranians think they're better than the Kuwaitis. The Kuwaitis think they're better than those in Dubai. But when it comes to the Arab League and what's best for the Arab race, they can come together and work on those things that they share in common. That is all we are saying as Pan-Africanists. The issue, though, with those who take issue with Pan-Africanism is a lot of our people are so in love with the differences. We are so in love with the tribalism. We are so in love with the conflicts. We are so in love with not getting along with one another that we want to keep highlighting the differences to the point that we try to make it look as if we cannot come together on no common terms. We have far more in common than we can ever have apart, even on the continent of Africa. I understand Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent in the world. It's the most genetically diverse continent in the world. It's the most culturally diverse continent in the world. But yet and still, Africa still has more in common than they can ever have apart. Sheikh Anta Diop, The Cultural Unity of Africa, I think is something that everybody needs to read who wants to overemphasize the differences as opposed to overemphasizing the commonalities and similarities. We are one. And until we begin to practice oneness, we will never get free. We all come from a common ancestor on African soil. That cannot be debated. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to agree on certain things. Pan-Africanism or perish.